Daf Pei Vav Amud Beis will begin Pei Vav Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the bottom. We had the machlokes previously, Rav Yehuda and Rav Huna, when you have the bore between the two chatzeros, as far as drawing water from the bore. So according to Rav Huna, the partition only has to be within the lip of the bore. It does not have to extend down into the water, below the water level. According to Rav Yehuda, he says that the partition, even according to Beis Hillel, which is more mekel than Beis Shammai, but it has to extend into the water below the surface of the water. So, Rav Yehuda says, Kaira arba materes b'churba. He says, if you have a case of a churba, so this so far is not that relevant to our discussion, it's just the introduction to it. He says, if you have a kaira that is in a churba is a ruin. So in the ruin it has walls that some of them are broken, some of them are already destroyed, some are still standing. The roof is destroyed, but it has a beam. So the beam itself, if it has a certain width, we can consider it to be a mechitza, to allow you to carry underneath it. Kara arba materes b'churba. If it's 4 tvachim wide, it is mater b'churba. You're allowed to carry underneath the kaira. So why is it mater over here in the churba? Because, as we'll see, there's a shita of Rashmal Rav Yossi who holds that a mechitza tluya is mater even on yabosh, even on a dry land. A suspended mechitza is matir, and therefore you have the kaira that's suspended over the area, so we say it's considered to be a mechitza tluya, it's considered to be mechitza, and therefore you can carry underneath the kaira. That's why Rashi learns, Taisus learns, no, that's not a discussion as far as mechitza tluya, it's a discussion as far as pitikra yared v'saisem, you have the edge of the kaira, and if it has 4 tefachim, we can say pitikra yared v'saisem, and it encloses the area underneath it, so it's now considered to be in an enclosed area, and therefore you can carry underneath it. Next halach is, which is relevant to our discussion. Rav Nachman, Rabba Ravua, he said, Kaira arba materes b'mayim. He said that if you have a kaira arba, a beam that's 4 tvachim wide, and so if you have that kaira, and you have water underneath it, you have the bore underneath it, it's matir, and therefore you can draw the water, and you can draw the water from, each one can draw the water from his side. How can each one draw from each side? The kaira will go to the other side, rather the dli, the bucket will go to the other side, and you'll be drawing the water from the other side to your side. How can you do that? You can't draw the water from the water that's on the other chaser to your side. When it says, the Rabbanan have a Kabbalah that, in general terms, a bucket does not travel more than 4 tvachim. So if the width of the kaira is 4, it's not going to come to the other side. It's not going to reach the other side. But underneath the kaira itself, the water is all mixed together. It belongs to both parties. So if he now takes the bucket and it comes underneath the kaira, then he is going to be taking the water from this end, from underneath the kaira, and going to be taking it to his side. Now this water belongs to both. So therefore, it should be also. So now we see over here, this over here seems to be a problem only according to Rav Yehuda. It's a kasha according to Rav Yehuda. According to Rav Huna, it's not a kasha. Because according to Rav Huna, he holds that the mechitza does not have to reach into the water level. So meaning, the point in Rav Huna is, so you have this mechitza tluya, it's not to separate the waters, it's not to ensure that you don't draw water from underneath the kaira, it's not to ensure that you don't even draw water from the other side. It is only to ensure that you don't directly draw water from the other side. It's just a heker. It doesn't even reach into the water level. Therefore, according to Rav Huna, we're not concerned if you draw water from underneath the kaira. The whole point of the mechitza tlui, according to Rav Huna, is that you don't directly draw water from the other side. But if it so happens that when you did not draw it directly, that you are drawing water from the other side, it's of no concern. So, according to Rav Huna, it's not a kasha, but according to Rav Yehuda, who says that the mechitza has to come into the water, which means to show you that you cannot draw water from the other side, even indirectly, it should be also. Now, the Rosh points out that even according to Rav Huna, but the mechitza has to come within the ugen, within the lip of the bore, and over here the kaira is on top. So he answers that's only in the case over there where we say where you're making this mechitza, you're making this flimsy mechitza, it has to come within the interior of the bore. But here you have a kaira which is more substantial. It's a greater heker. It's not required, according to Rav Huna, to come within the bore. So Gemara says, Ella, you must say, Ella mishum dekal hu shekilacham b'mayim. Now one approach is that it's Ella, that the way Rashi explains it. Ella, we must say, yes, in chanami it's a kasha, and therefore we say that we reject Rav Yehuda, and the mechitza does not have to come within the water. It's a kula. The Chacham made a kula by water, and therefore there's no requirement. We don't require it to come into the water level, and we reject Rav Yehuda, and l'chayr we go with Rav Huna. That's one mahalach. The Rosh has another mahalach, and he says it's not Geiris Ella, and it's not a kasha, and it's rather mishum the kalu shekilacham b'mayim. It's an explanation. Over there, as the Rosh himself, we learned before, we saw previously, over there it's talking where there's a kaira, where the kaira is more substantial. Over there they're mekel, and it does not have to reach into the water below the surface of the water. But in our case, by the case of the be'er, or the bore rather, it has to come beneath the surface of the water. Kidaboy minei Rabbi Tavel merav. Like the shaila that Rav Tavel had merav, which we'll see from here, this inyan of a kula, that there's a kula by mayim. It's a kula shekilu cham b'mayim. What is the case of the shaila? Mechitza tluya mal shetatir b'churba. Can you have a suspended wall? Can it be matir in a churba? If you have a ruin, a churba ruin, so the walls were broken, were breached at the bottom. They did not come up to the bottom of the ground. They were hanging. They were suspended. They didn't reach within 3 tefachim of the ground. Is that mutter? Is that considered to be a mechitza? And is it mutter to carry? Amar lei, he said, ein mechitza tluya materes al b'mayim. No, a suspended wall is only mutter b'mayim, only over a body of water. Kal hu she'kilo chacham b'mayim. It's a kula that the chum were makel by mayim, by water. Otherwise, a mechitza tluya is not mutter. By churba, it's also. We have a principle that we say that a mechitza where the goats can run under it, that nullifies the mechitza. That Bekias Gedoim is mevatel the mechitza. So by churba, mechitza tluya is also by mayim. Now we say by mayim, you might think that it should be the same thing, even though there's no gedim. So the way Shulchan Aruch Rav explains it is that even though by mayim there's no gedim, so there's no Bekias Gedoim, there's no gedim. But nevertheless, there are fish. Now, midaraisa, it certainly doesn't nullify the mechitza, but you might think that midarabbanan it should nullify the mechitza. So we say no. Kal hu shekilu chacham b'mayim. They were mekel, and they did not impose an isur d'rabbanan on mayim. But that's davke b'mayim, but it's not by a churba. So we see this principle that kal hu shekilu chacham b'mayim. Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda. Now this is not to be confused with Rabbi Yehuda the Amora, which we were just discussing. This is the next segment of the Mishnah that says Omar Rebbe Yehuda, the Tana Rebbe Yehuda says, Leite Mechitza. He says you don't require this Mechitza in the bore. You have the Mechitza that was built to separate the Chatzeres. You have the wall anyway. So that serves as a partition for the water below. You do not have to construct a separate special Mechitza for the water. So he says it must be that Rabbi Yehuda is going with the shita of Yosi that says even though this mechitza was not constructed for water, it was constructed to separate the chatzeros. It was constructed for yabosh, for dry land. Nevertheless, even by dry land, it's a mechitza tluya, it's suspended. A mechitza tluya, suspended mechitza that has not come all the way down to the ground is matir not only by mayim, by water, it's also matir by yabasha. That must be Rabbi Yehuda that's going with the shita of Yosi, who apparently l'chayr would hold that way. This time we learned in the Mishnah, Hamishal shel defonas milmala limata. If one is weaving the walls of a sukkah. So he's weaving it or braiding it. He makes it out of a material that's woven, and he's now being mishal so milmala lamata. So he starts on top and he's weaving it and he's coming down, and now it's coming down and further down. Bisman shegavoyis min oras gimel tefachim psula. If there is a gap between them and the ground, so it doesn't come all the way to the ground. So there's a gap on the bottom. If that opening, if that gap is 3 more tefachim, then it's psula. Then it's psula. If it doesn't reach the ground, it's psula. But if he starts on the ground and he's going up, and it doesn't reach the top, it doesn't reach the schach on top, even though there is a gap, even though there's a space between the wall on top and the schach, but as long as the wall is yud or more, 10 or more tzvachim high, it's a kosher mechitza. The gap on top is not a problem. The gap on the bottom is a problem because if there's a space on the bottom, it's a gap, is a space gedim boikim by that the goats, the animals can run through. Then we say it's mevatal the mechitza. It nullifies the mechitza. It's not considered mechitza if it doesn't keep out the animals from the bottom. So if it's a mechitza shegedim boikim by, it's not a mechitza. But on top, the gap on top, there it doesn't interfere with the privacy of the area. The animals don't go on that height. That gap on top does not negate the fact that there's a gap. It doesn't negate the concept of a mechitza of an enclosed area. So therefore, if it's on top, if the space is on top, it's kosher. But Rav Yosi says, "Kashem shlamata lamala asora, kach milmala lamata asora." He says there's no difference. There's no difference if the gap is on top or the gap is on the bottom. In both cases, it's kosher. So apparently, Rav Yosi holds that a mechitza tluya is mater even by yabosha. That even though the mechitza does not come all the way down to the ground, as in the case of sukkah, we're talking about yabosha, the ground, the dry land. Nevertheless, it's kosher. So therefore, l'chari holds that a mechitza tluya is mater even by yabosha. And let us say that Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah is going with this shita of Rabbi Yosi. But the Gemara says, "V'lohi." Rabbi Yehuda Savarlak Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yosi Savarlak Rabbi Yehuda. No, they don't necessarily. Neither of them don't necessarily hold of each other. Rabbi Yehuda Savarlak Rabbi Yosi Ad Kan Likam Rabbi Yehuda Ela Be'Ruv Chatzeres Rabbanan. Yes, it's true that in our Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda said that it's mechitza tluya, it's matir, even though it's yabosha, it's not only by mayim. But here, in our discussion, we're talking about Eruv Chatzeres. Eruv Chatzeres, the whole requirement is a requirement of Rabbanan. So perhaps I'll tell you, Dafka, over here, he is mekel. Aval sukkah deraisa loy. But by sukkah, which is a din deraisa, then perhaps I'll tell you that he argues with Rabbi Yosi. And he says that no, as far as a din deraisa is, then we would say that we will not allow a mechitza tluya. Now, the way the Chazon Ish learns over here, and we'll see in the next piece, the way the Ritva explains it in the next piece, it comes out, he wants to say, based on the Ritva, as follows. So therefore, what are we being mechalik? We're being mechalik between the deraisa and the rabbanan. We're only matir the mechitza tluya by a aruve chetzeros, which is a derabanan. Meaning that mid-deraisa, I'll tell you that a mechitza tluya is loishmei mechitza. That I'll tell you that minat Torah a mechitza shegadim boikim boy is not a kosher mechitza. By Rav Chatzerais, it's the Rabbanan were mekel, and they allowed it. But Sukkah, which is a deraisa, they didn't allow it. So that's one side. Now the Gemara continues and says, "V'loi Rabbi Yosi savar like Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yosi doesn't hold like Rabbi Yehuda either." Now Rabbi Yosi was matrid b'sukkah. He was matrid b'sukkah, but he was. Well, perhaps I'll tell you, he would not be matrid by a Rav Chatzerais, because Ad kan loy kam Rabbi Yosi ela b'sukkah d'yaseres. Maybe it's only Rav Yosi was matir b'sukkah, which is an Isser Essay, and therefore it does not have a lav. It's not as chamor. He was matir. Aval Shabbos Isser Skilahu loy Alma. But by the case of Shabbos, which is more chamor than sukkah, which has a punishment, involves a punishment of skila, of misa with skila, of stoning, I'll tell you perhaps that over there he would not allow a mechitza tluya. Now, even though Eruv says there's the rabbanon, but as Rashi explains, the rabbanon would make it they're misakin the kain deraisa. So perhaps even though Rav Yosi is mater mechitza tluya b'yabasha by sukkah, that's because it's an Yisrael. But by Shabbos, perhaps I'll tell you, he won't be mater because it's more chomer than it's skila. I Ruva Chaseres is the Rabbanan, the Musakin came the Raisa. Now the way Ritva explains it on this side, it works the other way. That Rav Yosi is mater b'sukkah. Now how can he be mater b'sukkah? It's a deraisa. Must be that min ha-Torah, according to this side, the ritual says, according to this side, that a mechitza tluya min ha-Torah is a mechitza, shmei mechitza. And the problem of Gedim Baikim Boy is not a psul d'oraisa, it's only the Rabbana. Therefore, by Sukkah, it's kosher. By Shabbos, the Rabbanan were machmir by Shabbos. It's a chomer the Rabbanan. And they were machmir by Shabbos, and even by Rav Chatzeres. And if you're going to say that according to Rav Yosi, he's not matir mechitza tluya nebash on Shabbos, well, if that's the case, there was a maisa where apparently they relied on mechitza tluya basha on Shabbos, and it was in Sipori, the place where Rav Yosi was the Mardasa, where who did it rely on, according to whose authority? Where it says loyal Pi Rav Yosi, the Maisa happened, it occurred after Rav Yosi was nifter, so he was no longer the Maradas and Sipari, and it was rather LLP Rabbi Shmuel Rav Yosi Nasa. It was based on the psak of his son, Rav Shmuel Rav Yosi. And Rav Shmuel Rav Yosi held that a mechitza tluya is matir by Yabasha even on Shabbos. But again, there once was a Maisa, they forgot to bring the Sefer Torah to the shul and before Shabbos. Now it came Shabbos and they didn't have the Sefer Torah in the shul. So what did they do? On what they did on Shabbos was they spread sheets on posts. So they therefore made a mechitza. Now these sheets did not come down to the ground. It was a mechitza tluya. It was on posts, and they made two lines of mechitzas with these sheets that did not come down to the ground. They made two lines, and therefore they separated this corridor from the other chatzeros. So even though the chatzeros were not ma'ariv, but they made a separation, and they were able to bring the Sefer Torah from the house to the shul. So the Malcha Parsus Dinim Alamudim Viviu Sefer Torah Korban, they brought the Sefer Torah and they length from it. So you see that he held, Rav Shmuel Bar Yosi held that a mechitza tluya is matir b'yabasha even on Shabbos. For the Gemara, a side question, so how could they spread the sheets on the post? L'chachil mishori, is it mutter to spread sheets on the post? And you can't make an oil on Shabbos, and even to begin with an oil, even if it's an oil arai, that you can't make it on Shabbos. Boine is also one of the malachas. So l'chachil mishori, can you make a mechitza to begin with on Shabbos? Everyone is maida that you can't make and to begin with from scratch an oil, even if it's an oil arai, even if it's a temporary oil, you can't make it on Shabbos. El the Gemara amends it. The Maisa as follows: Ela motzu sadinim prusim alamud. Not that they spread the sheets, not that they made it, but they saw that sheets were spread on posts. And Veviya Sefer Torah Karba, and they used it as the mechitzas, even though it did not come to the ground, and they were able to bring the Sefer Torah and lane from it.